I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Michael Pearce, who wrote and directed the new film Encounter. And this is a very interesting story, and it has layers to it, and it isn't quite what you expect it to be. And I'm just wondering what was the initial idea for this that sort of got the ball rolling that you wanted to explore?
Well, it was a script that came to me after I made my first film, Beast. I really wanted to find material to direct as opposed to, writing script from the ground upwards. It took me 7 years to write my initial project, and I just want to work at greater frequency than my writing ability seems to allow. So I was reading a lot of material, and I was trying to find something that was part character portrait and part elevated genre film. And I was surprised to see that there wasn't much of that material around. I was either reading dramas or hard genre films, and so I started to think maybe I'm going to have to write my next film. And then I read Joe's script, and I really connected to the characters, like specifically this relationship of a father and his two sons, and how they kind of collectively go through a coming of age moment throughout the movie. And there seemed to be like a very universal theme there of this loss of innocence that a kid goes through when they realize that their father's just a human being, and that means that they're flawed and sometimes need help. And a father who's kind of driven to protect his children, who must learn to like sort of expose his vulnerabilities in a way. So what, my inspiration was really that story, and it had a lot of resonance with my own upbringing, and I found it very poignant. And I thought, well, if I'm affected by this, then I think other people are going to be too. So it had all the fun genre stuff, but it was really a connection to the characters that drew me in.
Yeah. And there are definitely a lot of films with this kind of sci-fi invasion element, and also there are a lot of films about family and more traditional drama. I'm curious if you had any specific influences that were sort of running through your head as you were developing the story or directing.
Yeah, I think a big influence on Joe's script was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, particularly, the 70s one with Donald Sutherland, which is just a great film. And I think it's so effective as a sci-fi because, it's not that idea is not contingent on monsters. The fear is from your next door neighbor or your best friend. And I thought we can continue to embrace that as an inspiration. And um, I think for me, it was Paris, Texas was a big inspiration. Every time I watch that film, I find it just such a warm-hearted, soulful, tender, movie, and that it's a very intimate portrayal of a father-son story, but set on this very epic landscape. That combination. I tried to hold on to, because we were trying to tell a very intimate story set within this very vast environment. And yeah, other filming influences, for me and the cinematographer, we were looking at, some thrillers that had a very rigorous and precise filmmaking language. Think films like No Country for Old Men or Sicario. We would watch a lot of those set pieces again and again to figure out um, yeah, they were like a helpful guide for how to execute those kind of scenes well that felt grounded and thrilling.
And I also the success of this film, I think, helps that Riz Ahmed is your lead, and because he has such a unique screen presence, and he just brings such an intensity here and a vulnerability all sort of mixed into one. Um, what made him the right choice for him to play Malik?
I mean, I think you partly spoke to it there that, that
Mm.
he has there's a toughness about Riz, there's this edge to him, but there's also, I wouldn't say softness. It's like, yeah, it's a vulnerability. And he wants to explore the vulnerabilities of his characters. He's kind of got the presence and charm of a leading man, but the interests of a character actor. And I think that's always, it's kind of like the best type of actor you could hope for in a way. They're always, the most memorable. And I think for me, it was, I'd never seen him in this type of role. I've never seen him play a father in a film or play a Marine veteran or someone that has that edge. But I intuitively felt that he had the ability to do it. It wasn't really a question for me that we could buy him in that role. You see what he's done for Sound of Metal, the research that he did, and learning sign language and learning how to play the drums. I thought definitely Riz can, there's no doubt that we're going to credibly buy him as a Marine. But it was really that empathetic screen presence that he has. When he's on screen, you kind of want to reach out into the movie and embrace the guy. And it gives you a lot of latitude as a director then for the character to make mistakes. They can do the wrong thing and the audience is really going to go with them. And I love movies that do that. I love Al Pacino's performance in Dog Day Afternoon because he can do whatever he wants, but you still love the guy somehow. And I think Riz, has a quality which is similar.
I completely agree. And I'm also curious what kind of ideas that he had for the character that maybe weren't there on the page.
I mean, it was so many in a way that because once I'd cast him in the role, part of our prep work was to read through the script together, and sometimes be very meticulous about it. And so one session could just be going through 5 pages of the script, and it was just a case of just finding nuances and subtext for every line, and sometimes the beats between the line, and just asking each other, what is the character really going through here? What do they believe? What are they trying to get out of the scene? How much is he trying to protect his kids? How much is paranoia playing a part? And it was part of our, the beginning of our actor-director relationship, but it was also, continued development in the script. So there's so many like micro adjustments that we made on a page-by-page level. Of course, one bigger aspect was that the character's ethnicity changed from how it was originally written. And I think during the beginning of our conversations, we said, oh, maybe we don't change any of the characters' names or we don't mention it. And then as we were developing the script, we just thought something seemed like it was a missed opportunity for this to be a case of race-blind casting, as if the character's ethnicity wasn't referenced. And we thought, okay, well, let's change the character's name. And, race can also play a part in some of the scenes when he encounters people along their journey. And we didn't want to be really on the nose, or we didn't want to, feel like we had to use a blunt racist remark. We wanted to respect the audience and thought, they can read a lot of subtext within a scene. But that was also a new layer of complexity that casting him brought into the script. So yeah, he helped in small and big ways, and he's someone that's very empathetic to a director's process. So you feel very comfortable inviting him in on the development of a script. Maybe it's not always the case with every writer, with every actor, but with Riz, it's certainly, I think he's got a filmmaker's brain in a way. So it's certainly elevated the material.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, with his kids, both of these young actors that play his sons are very natural. How did you end up finding them?
Long casting process, working with a great casting director called A.V. Kaufman, who's got great relationships with lots of local casting directors all over the States. And we made a decision that we would look for kids that didn't necessarily have much acting experience, as well as kids that had maybe been on screen before. And so we saw a lot of self-tapes, hundreds of kids, lots of talented kids, and it was from all over. We got tapes in from New York, Montana, Texas, Nevada, Louisiana, Canada. The only concern we had with some places was that the accent could be quite regionally thick, and it might be hard for some kids to work with a dialect coach to neutralize their local accent. But otherwise, we were really open to wherever the kid could come from and whatever their level of experience was. And then I maybe found Lucian River and Aditya halfway through the process. And as we were continuing to see more tapes and audition other kids, I was getting to know them as people. I was kind of drawn to them, and we would have like Zoom chats and WhatsApp calls, because because of COVID, we couldn't all be in the same environment until very close before the shoot. So I needed to have a very strong gut instinct that they were going to be the right kids for the part. And part of that barometer was not just their acting ability, but just I needed to feel a connection with them as people. Because I thought, if I can connect with them and I can feel like I'm close friends with them, then they're going to connect with each other and they're going to connect with Riz. But you don't know until you get actors in the same room. So it was gratifying when we did the first scene together that I could just see there was like a really strong familial chemistry between them.
Nice. And I imagine with a story like this, it could have been entirely centered on Malik and this road trip with his kids, but there's also this added element where Octavia Spencer plays his parole officer and she's trying to find him, and it's obviously very crucial to the end of the story. But why do you think it's important to include that sort of shift in perspective?
I think I wanted the audience to be invited into an objective sense of reality, a third of the way into the story. I felt there was a danger with this script that if we left the sort of perceptual shift that the film goes through up until the end, it would really feel like the film was contingent on a sort of twist. And I thought to mitigate against that, not that films haven't done that successfully, but it's not my thing. I needed to invite the audience onto a different perspective early on, so it's kind of built into the premise of the film. And then there's a different sense of jeopardy that the audience is invited into, because then you're following the law enforcement as they're pursuing Riz's character, and the FBI have a very dark interpretation of what he's doing, and Octavia's character has a much more empathetic interpretation, and you're really willing her to be right, but maybe there's a tiny doubt in the back of your mind. And I thought there's some fascinating suspense to kind of mine from that.
Absolutely. And, in terms of production, this is a pretty grounded film, but there are these moments of visual effects, and the opening sequence is also very striking on a visual level. And I'm curious what your approach was just for the visual design of certain elements like that opening, and also whenever there's certain characters who are infected with this microorganism, just the technical aspect, like what were your resources, what was your initial vision for that?
Yeah, with the opening, I kind of built from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That opening scene. I thought, well, it's been such a fundamental influence on, from Joe's script that he wrote 10 years ago. Let's just embrace this as a reference. And it also felt important for me just to get a foothold within the sci-fi world very early. And, kind of one of the visual motifs of sci-fi is to start out in space. It's a very strong statement to an audience about the kind of world that they're in. You see it in Star Wars, or 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Alien, or more recently Annihilation, or Under the Skin. You start out in the cosmos, and I kind of built that whole opening sequence from there. And I love the idea that this parasite that was coming down could start. It could seem threatening, but there was almost something beautiful about it. And I like this visual irony that when this meteor dust sprinkles down into a forest, there's actually something beautiful about it. It's just that no one's around to witness it. So we used lots of techniques, whether that was doing location shooting in a redwood forest. We had an insect unit spending 3 days shooting insects in the UK. We, of course, built the space shots fully in CGI, and we're just trying to make it all seem very seamless and organic. And as the film develops, I was just very cognizant that we had to incorporate visual effects in such a way that they didn't eclipse the father-son relationship, because if they started to dominate the film too much, you might think you were watching A Quiet Place. And I always needed to pull back a bit and go, I really felt that the audience should feel confident that the film is really about this trio, this family unit, and it's not necessarily about the alien threat.
Right. It is just about family, and there's also certain aspects of the film that are very relevant to our modern day concerns. Obviously, the poor treatment of veterans being one of them, but a lot of Malik's worry is about this microorganism that's not very detectable, that is infecting the public, which shares a lot of the same worry that we have with the pandemic, obviously. And I'm wondering about just the timeline of production for you, and how much the pandemic actually might have caused you to make any changes or affected the story in some ways to be going through all of this at the same time.
Yeah, well, it's one of those strange situations where, we wrote this material, we were ready to shoot, and then the pandemic hit. So, a lot of these elements were already embedded in the script. I mean, many of them were already in Joe's script that he started writing 10 years ago. Um, and it's, sometimes you write material and it's several years down the line that it has a greater resonance with the world, with the world around you. And I had a conversation with the producers and with Riz about how much we should, include COVID as a kind of fabric of the world. But then we decided that the film already reflected so much of what, we were going through, and particularly in the US, that it wasn't necessary. We didn't need to overemphasize it. And I just also thought there was going to be maybe a slew of COVID-related projects within a year's time, and I didn't want our film to date too quickly. And so I think, yeah, an audience can already read into, the invisible enemy that's infecting half the population, and they can read into conspiracy theories and how sometimes, the real world can feel like it's on the brink of an apocalypse, and that we have a very slippery grasp on what the truth is. And we're all trying to figure that out on a day-to-day basis. And that's already in the story. And so we didn't need to, that was just, fortunate in some ways. We didn't need to overemphasize that any further.
Right. Yeah, it does help it feel more timeless, I suppose, in a way. And just in these last few minutes, since we are an awards website, I did want to talk to you about your BAFTA win a few years ago for Beast, which was your first feature. Can you talk about just that experience of winning that BAFTA and what it meant to get that encouragement from people in your industry, and whether you feel like any of that actually impacted, making this and your other future career endeavors?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. Like, you don't, of course, anytime you make a film, certainly a first feature, maybe sometimes maybe you do, some people make films and you're thinking about it as a prestige picture, or it's got to work, through an awards route, but definitely not with a first feature. You're just trying to, it's such a feat to make the first film. That's much further down the line. So when that all happened, it was, it was really exciting, but you also feel an immense sense of pride for all the work, of course, that everyone's put into it. And it inevitably, every film, but every first film is very difficult to make. So to get to that stage, you just feel like, wow, wow, we made it. And then when we won, it was huge. And I'm just thinking back now, it was actually Riz that gave us the award. And I think in his speech, he might have said something. I'd need to go back and look at it. He might have made a joke about how, the people that win this award are the next, the new filmmakers, and if they're ever looking for actors to be in their film, that he's available. I'm not sure. I've got a vague memory that this might be the case. So I want to go back and watch it. So maybe something about me and Riz working together was already set on that evening. And you win something like that, inevitably, you're going to have meetings with lots of production companies and producers. To some degree, though, I think it is like the nomination is already, that was already a big win for us, just to be there that evening. And, I know a lot of the people that had also made the debut features that year, and, they'd made great films, and we were kind of just in it together. So I don't know, it was great. I think it was like even more great for my old man who was there, because, to see that trophy. But for us, it was more like an icing on the cake of that, the whole lead up to that award ceremony.
Wow. Well, congrats on that, and congrats on this film as well. For those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Oscar predictions. Thanks, Michael, for speaking with me today.
Great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.